Okay, so let's talk about where we are at. We have our body that is completely all attached. We have, it's all sewn together with the legs in and the tail are all set in there. And then we have our opening for the neck right here. Then we have our face. Our face is attached. It's got its ears in here. And it's wrong side out because that's how we need to attach it to the body. It needs to be. And we have our two little hands. So we are ready to attach all of the pieces together and sew the neck. So let's talk about how we do that. Let's start by attaching our arms on our body piece. We have marked our O marking, and I should have marked the other one on this side, but there should be an O marking right here, and we are going to put our hands right there at that O marking. We have an O and an N marking to show where they should be between both of them. Here's the N marking, but sometimes I find that my fox's arms are a little narrower than what they should be, so what I do is I always just make sure that I line them up with the O, and then if they don't quite make it to the end, then that's okay. If we start by lining it up to the O, then we'll make sure that both of them are lined up evenly against on the belly and they're not laying funny or offset from each other. So start with that O, and then we'll know that they are centered on the body. And then if they reach the end, yay. If not, it's not really that noticeable or that big of a deal. So get your arms in there, and then I think the easiest thing to do is baste those little guys in. Then you're not worried about if they are attached like they should be. So let's do that, and then I'll show you how to attach the head. So this little guy, we've got those arms basted in. Now we're going to make sure, see right here, I would be concerned here when I'm attaching my neck that because that little point is down right there at the seam allowance, that's about where I should be stitching, that little arm is going to be hanging out, and we don't want that little frayed edge hanging out. So I actually am going to fix that and re-sew my basting line. We're gonna be grateful that we basted and fixed it before we actually stitched that neck in, because we don't want to have to stitch the neck twice if we don't have to. So let me hurry and fix that. So here I have it all fixed, and that is up against the edge of the fabric a little bit better where it belongs. So we're not going to have to worry about if it's sitting where it needs to. Okay, so now on to attaching the head. Right here we have I marked. That is the center between that's the middle of the belly. So that's where we want to mark the I. We're going to line it up with this seam right here. Here's his nose. And so this is the front of his face, and this seam right here is going to match up with the eye mark right there. And we're going to pin that one into place first. We want to start in the center and work our way around to the back side. So get your most important seams lined up first and then work outwards. Okay, so we've got eye lined up. Then actually, right now I have the body outside of the head. I think that it's easier to stick the little body inside of the head, then it's gonna line up and be lined up easier. Okay, get that little hand in there. So we're just gonna keep working our way around. And pinning this seam right here, because the head comes out a little bit away from the body. Make sure that you open it all the way up and are getting that right where the 1/4 of an inch is going to be sewn right there at the end of the seam allowance, that is where it's open. It needs to be, or else you might find that you have a little weird bunch there at the end. So make sure you open that seam all the way. And then keep working your way around. So see how they lined up perfectly right there? That's how we want it to be. We want each side to line up perfectly. Those corners should line up almost evenly. Okay, so now we're going to move to the other side. This is a little bunched up, so I'm going to straighten it out so that we don't catch any weird fabric in there. Okay, so see that? See how we got that all pinned on? Okay, now let me show you. This one did not line up as awesomely. I could try pinning it again. I think I'm going to actually. Can you see that extra bunching right here? And we've got a little bit of extra bunching right there. I think that I need to try pinning it again, so we can get it all lined up like it's supposed to be. Okay, that didn't really help. I don't know if I cut that wrong but it should have lined up a little bit better than that. But I'll show you guys how to kind of fix that a little bit later when it doesn't quite line up. Okay, so now the neck is all attached or pinned in there. So we're gonna go slow and work our way around. If you want to baste it, I think that is an excellent idea. It makes it so that you can pull it out and look at him and make checks to make sure that he looks all right before actually putting him all together. But for this video, I'm just gonna sew them together. So let's do that. So I like to hold the whole body of the fox like this. I've got the whole wad in there, and then as we go around we can sew, and because it's a circle, we're just going to make sure that the back that's already done sewing is coming up and around so that we always can have enough room for the rest of the neck to so it's not tugging weird. But I just squish the whole thing in place. The neck all sewn together. So let's open it up and make sure that everything's in place. Okay, so we have the little arms. So we're going to check the neck right here. Go all the way around. Make sure it looks good. Okay, I don't know what that is. Cut that off. Okay, so here's our fox. Now I told you I was going to show you a little secret, not really a secret, but something that I learned after making this pattern to actually make it so you don't have to do a ladder stitch through his neck. So remember how we only did a short line right here of stitching rather than clear down here to the K? What we're going to do is, we've got this all lined up. We're going to turn him back around this direction, and we're going to line it up again, and we're going to line up that seam right there, and we're just going to ignore, this is where we had a little bit of extra fabric at the edge. We're just going to ignore that. Line up your seam and line up the body pieces. Get it lined up as best as you can. And then we're going to sew from the tail right here, the end stitch on the back of the body. We're going to sew right there all the way up. And you're going to line all this up as best as you can with this little tag there, so it's not going to be perfect, but do the best that you can at lining it all up. And then we're going to go all the way up to right around K and leave this opening right here to stuff it, to turn it around and stuff it. So let's do that. And this is actually the method that I have if you buy the lion and the doll pattern. This is what we actually do, and it makes it so much easier to ladder stitch it. It's not so fun to have to ladder stitch through a seam, so that counteracts that, which is nice. So I wanted to show you this other side because I've lined up that seam as well as I can, and there's a little bit of this extra because it didn't line up, but like I said, the most important part is to line up that seam and then just leave this little tag hanging there so that it all lines up perfectly. So let's go ahead and sew that. Okay, so you see that? That means there's a lot less stitching to do on the back side. Easy peasy. Okay, so now we can turn in the right side out again, which is a little tougher because we made that hole smaller, but it's worth it when we don't have to ladder stitch that seam. Okay, there we go. That is our finished fox. When we do, after we get them all stuffed, we will stitch the nose and ladder stitch the nose on. Okay, I just wanted to talk a little bit about stuffing. Here's his little head and his body. So what we want to do is first, you don't want to do very big stuffing pieces at a time. The bigger your stuffing pieces, the more likely you are to have lumps when in the finished product. So do small pieces at a time, and then we're going to work at getting all of the stuffing into the little narrow spots first. So in this case, we're going to start by packing it into his little bum and then working our way up until it's pretty stiff. And then when we start to do the face, we're going to start with his nose and his cheeks, putting the stuffing in those areas first, and then working on filling the rest of the cavity of his head. Because if we start with just filling the cavity of his head, it makes it harder to put little pieces of stuffing inside his all those other little pieces that we talked about, the bum and the nose and the cheeks. As far as the arms go, we just want to stuff them. I always start by stuffing the bottom, and then I do up here and stuff it, and then I leave where my little ladder, where I'm going to have to hand stitch it, I leave that a little bit less stuffed, and then as I get the ladder stitch closed, I add a little bit of extra stuffing as I'm closing it. And that goes the same for the feet. Okay, so we have him all stuffed. He is ready to have his seams all closed. So this is how I do. The ladder stitch is the best way to close it because it's a blind stitch. Once it's closed, you won't be able to see it. So what you do is you come up and under right at the end of the last seam, or at the last stitch, wherever that was, under the seam. I like to pinch it and get it all nice and straight, and I kind of press it, iron it, whatever, with my fingers. I think it's called finger pressing. Anyway, that gives you a little bit of a seam, a little bit of a line to work with. And then this is how you do the ladder stitch. So you go from one side to the other and you just catch a little bit right there in that seam that fold that you created, and you pull it, and you just keep going back and forth, grabbing a little bit on each side of the seam, and you try to make it as straight as possible. The straighter that it is, the better, the less likely it is going to be to tug or pull weird. So just keep going until you go all the way across. Make sure as you're going, you're tucking in your stuffing so that there's not anything weird hanging out. Then you can, once you tighten it, you can keep going. I know some people wait to tighten it until they're completely done, which is an option. I just kind of do a few stitches and then tighten as I go. Okay, so we've reached the end. So we're just gonna pull all those tight all the way through. If you get a little bunching, it might be because you pulled it a little too tight. Just kind of wiggle it so that it loosens up a little bit. But there is the ladder stitch. We're gonna do that for all the arms, the tail, and the legs, and then the back of the head. So here is our tail. We've got both pieces together. We're just going to stitch up and around and all the way around, and we're going to leave the bottom straight line open. So let's do that. So here's our little nose. Clean up the threads. We're gonna clip all of our edges so it turns out nicely. Then we're gonna turn this around. Here's my hemostats. They're awesome. Get yourself a pair if you don't have any. Just pinch it and pull it through. Just like that. Stick your hemostats back in there and stretch it all. Get all those little seams pushed out all the way. Okay, add a tiny bit of batting if you are using a thinner fabric like cotton. I don't think if you are using a thicker fabric you always need to add this, but you can if you want to. Okay, so once you get that in, all we're going to do is we're going to tuck everything in. We're going to tuck this seam in there so we can't see it anymore. There's our little nose. We're gonna just put it right here on the tip of his nose and pin it into place like that, and then we're going to just do the simple little ladder stitch all the way around. You can position it, this one's going out a little bit, or you could position it up so it's sticking up a little bit, however you want to place the nose. Okay, so let's do the ladder stitch on the nose. We'll see how well I do with this. I usually have this right up against my chest to do it, so but bring it out on one of the seams. Then you're going to grab a piece of the fox and pull it through. That's what you're going to do, is you're just going to keep going around. You're going to grab a piece of the nose, and then a piece of the fox right there where it's going to attach. Keep turning them around, make sure you can see what you're doing. And then go around 2 or 3 times to make sure it's super secure on there and that it's sitting nicely. Then when you're done, just tie a little knot and push the needle into the fox and out in a different spot so you can cut your thread.